parents. Like my mum had motor neurons for 7 years, so I looked after her for all that time, and then my dad got leukemia after she left, and I looked after him for a while. And I think that's important. And my dad always said, I never want you to look after me like you did your mum, but I thought that was important to be able to be there for them and give back. And I think that's important that you, especially when your parents, something happens to them, the perspective of life is huge, and you've got to have the right perspective, put your energy the right place. And even though that was tough going through, it was some of the I guess most quality years that I've ever spent with my parents. Like, I was in Cairns Base with my dad, sleeping by his side for a month, trying to look after him and stuff. And we were able to tell stories of when he was a kid, relive some of my racing and stuff. And he wasn't the most, giving emotionally as a cane farmer. He wasn't, didn't show a lot of emotion, but that time that we had together, he told me all these stories, and I thought, I'd never replace that. And that was the upside of having like a terminal disease, that you had time to think about these things. We planned his funeral together. We worked out what music he wanted, who he wanted, and same with my mum. She lost the ability to talk and do a lot of things that I was able to do for her. Anyway, long story is that you got to have perspective in life and not sweat the small stuff. I think we get caught up in our own stuff and all about making the $1 million and having the big house and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, you're only here once, so you've got to live life as well, and hopefully pass on as many good vibes as you can to your kids, so that they grow up good people in the world and give back when they need to, rather than just take. So yeah, I guess if I could pass on something, then it's just don't sweat the small stuff. The prevalence of mental health issues these days is huge, and people get bogged down in social media and, like I said, making the almighty dollar. And I think it's a negative in a lot of ways. That I just lost a friend recently, Paul Green, as everyone in the North would know from the Cowboys. And you think, how bad life has to get to that point. And I think there's a lot of lessons there. And sometimes people, when that happens, if they did time again, they'd probably have a different decision, but it's final. So I think my message to everyone is, like I said, just live life and try to make the most of it and give back and support everyone around you and be good to your family. And and hopefully that will reflect back on you.
That's fantastic. And if you'll allow me, I'll tell. I've just come out of the Queensland Police. I did 30 years in the job.
Okay.
Of course, we go to a lot of attempted suicides, and one of them was a job I went to, and I won't go into the specific details because I don't want to identify anyone. Was this person a parent, an elderly grandparent actually, who was suffering from a terrible terminal disease, and so there was an attempt, and we turned up, stopped the person, and all that kind of stuff. Ambos, all that kit and caboodle. So just turn up, and I'm talking to this person, going, what's going on with you? Like, can you tell me what's going on? And one of this person's kids had come to the room and said, look, I don't want to be a burden to my kids. And she was beautiful too. This young daughter just collapsed and gone, do you not understand? You are not a burden. How can you even think that? Like, okay, yes, you are suffering. I get that. Yes, you feel like a burden. And yes, I am doing things for you. And yes, you've lost a lot of what you conceived of as autonomy. But this is a pleasure for me. It's actually a joy in my life to serve you in this capacity. And this wonderful, articulate young lady, like, just kind of saying that. Of course, she's bawling her eyes out, and it's just like, her heart. And to the best of my knowledge, after that, like, there was no more attempts after.
Yeah.
And, you know, I was just like, and, you know, it's nothing to do with the coppers. It's just the fact that I happened to ask the right question at the right time with the right person in the room.
Yeah.
And yeah, like this person, oh God, it was amazing. It was, as I'm sure you can imagine, it was a kind of pretty moving moment, actually.
Yeah, well, it's a generational thing, isn't it? That generation, they've done it pretty hard their whole lives and given, I guess, and then they don't want their kids to have to, you know, look after them. And like I said, that was the same with my dad. And, you know, what they don't see, it's a privilege. It's you know, I can't wait to help as such to look after your parents that have given up so much. You know, my parents were hard workers and the work ethic they passed on to me was huge. But yeah, it's a privilege rather than a burden. So, but they don't see it like that, I guess. And
it's the wrong conceptual framework, though. Like, I mean, how did we get to this point in society where people genuinely think that unless they're contributing some sort of material stuff, they're of not worth? I mean, there's so much more to the human condition than that.
Yeah, and yeah, I think too the older generation, you know, they've got so much to give. People forget that they've lived a full life, and you know, sometimes you see older people can't get a job in that, whereas I can't get that because they've got so much experience and so much to pass on that they're lost. All that's lost when, you know, people don't appreciate that. And, you know, I used to live overseas. I lived in France, southern France, for quite a few years. And I used to see the older people there treated so different. They, you know, if you're at a post office and an older person, there's a big line waiting to get served, older person walks in, they go straight to the front of the line and no one says a thing. And that just sort of showed that, you know, they're put on a pedestal rather than like, you've had your time, move on. So I really, that resonated with me, that, you know, they're so respected. And, you know, I'm not going to say that's the same. We don't look after ours 100% of the time here, but, you know, I think it's something that the older people have so much to give back. And, you know, I think we should probably look after them a little bit better. I think, you know, getting a bit technical with all the government stuff now, where they're trying to reform all the you know, retirement villages and stuff. And I think that's important because in the past, like my mum, when she had motor neurons, you know, the troubles that you have and living conditions and things that go on there, you know, it's just tragic. And you hate to see your parents go through something like that. And yeah, I think there's a lot needs to be done with older people, the more respect given. But yeah,
Totally.
We'll be there one day.
Yeah, and one of the other conversations I had was with this bloke, Andrew Scull, who's a sociologist, and he engages a lot in the mental health and psychology and the mental health area. He's a terror to psychologists, actually. He's constantly attacking psychology as a profession. Like, they must hear his name and go, ah! Like some of the books he's written is basically, you know, it's kind of fraudulent. Anyway, so I'm having this conversation with him, and he said, look, so with all of these things, with mental illness and whatnot, and he goes, it's not that there's not a biological component to this. It's like, yes, that person's serotonin is at this level, and yes, and all this kind of stuff. We can measure that, we understand that. He said, but conceptually, I think that's more of a symptom than a cause. He said, just because it's happening, we think that that's the cause. No, it's probably a symptom. And yes, there's all these other problems that he actually puts a lot more weight on. He goes, you got the socioeconomic context. So how people feel about themselves, how, you know, what is their position in society? What does value, you know, what value do we put on people who are terminally ill? What value do we put on, you know, what narratives do we tell them? Do we tell them they should be killing themselves with euthanasia? Are we saying this? And he led up to this point, and he articulated it so well. He goes, at some level, all the mental illness and everything else is a problem with meaning. It's not that there's not a biological component. It's not that there's not a socioeconomic context. That's not what he's arguing. Fundamentally, it's a problem. It's a problem with meaning. And I nearly fell off my chair when he said that, because I thought he nailed it. He just articulated something so clearly that yeah, that like, you know, I knew from my experience in the police, and like I've kind of looked into that a little bit too.
Yeah, well, you look at all the social media stuff out there these days, and there's a artificial, you know, environment that kids have got to live up to these days, and I think that plays a lot into it. You know, what they've got to look like, what clothing they've got to wear, whatever, you know, all that sort of stuff that you know, contributes to kids not being happy with themselves, and it's unfortunate that is the way that the internet's gone, I guess. And it's so accessible that people see, you know, so much stuff that is just not true, basically, at the end of the day. You know,
Yeah.
all these influences and stuff that they you get a lot of it down here on the Gold Coast. You see them, you know, they go to the beach and they don't actually enjoy the beach. They just take photos of themselves and look at how wonderful my life is. And yeah, it's just, I don't know, it's just crazy. Just
It's a problem of meaning. Homelessness. It's a problem of meaning. Skull was right. He nailed it.
Yeah.
But well, mate,
That's heavy.